must go on.
Thank you.
And this wonderful, wonderful book that you've done.
Thank you.
And so here I am. Not as pretty as her, but I'm still here. Got pulled out of work. But hey.
Thank you for coming.
Sorry for the delay, because it's all last minute.
Thank you for coming. And we were just, sorry, I'll get back to that question about how Girl Power started in 1 minute. But before you came in, this entire room, before you walked in, actually championed you a little bit and said, thank you for having a man who stands up, who sits over here and talks about the stories of women and sort of champions that cause. So thank you for coming through for Girl Power.
No, thank you so much for doing this book, and, I've grown up with... I lost my dad really early in life, so I've grown up with women all around me, and some very independent-minded women. Since I come from a Punjabi household, Punjabi women are. But, I had a grandmom, mom, 3 sisters, myself. So I feel very passionately, and I understand, not just superficially, women should be encouraged and this, because that's all. It's all rubbish, It's a personality, and you should just look at it beyond a gender, just as a personality, a person. But and then I got married to this wonderful, woman, and who's a super fighter.
Strong-headed as a Punjabi girl.
Stronger. Because the only one stronger than them are Marathi women. So.
You already offended all the Punjabi women and all the Maharashtrian women as well.
And
no, they're beautiful. I mean, I would say very fiercely independent. The problem is not the women. The problem is the men.
There you go.
The men cannot. The men, take some time to adapt. The women. I'm sorry to digress a little bit from my book, but the women have evolved by leaps and bounds in our Indian society. As compared to men. We are still pampered. We still are in the notional, entitled, patriarchal, and we're still, living in that era in our heads. And it's taking men far longer to adapt and understand a woman and her individuality beyond her sex. And it's wonderful that you've done this book, and you've done this book in such a a palatable way, because I think it's very, very important that not only the girls, the young girls, the little ones on, Sonali's book club go through it, but it's most important that the little boys go through it,
That's right.
And I have a 14-year-old myself, and, we try and make him as compassionate as possible and, make him understand his female side as well, and it's absolutely, I couldn't go through it in detail, but, whatever I've gone through on the digital copy that you shared with us, it is absolutely fantastic. And, there's so many, wonderful women in there that we have not even heard of,
That's right.
And I think it's incredible that you've brought out all these women in such a, easy to the eyes, easy to the, to the, vocabulary, and so, it will have a far more reach. Very simple title, Girl Power, and so, far-reaching and simple. I think it's just fantastic. The animation, the illustrations are so wonderful. And, I was actually thinking on my way here, that, I saw a series once long time back on History Channel called, The Men Who Shaped America.
Yeah, of course.
And I was like, there's right here, there's an anthology series right there, that's what I do. So I think from that point of view. I said, there's an anthology series right there, to, women who shaped India, nobody's ever done that, And I think you should actually pursue that. It's fantastic,
I'll talk to you later about the filming connections. No, but thank you for saying that. And look, that was very much the idea behind this book, was to also, and we were talking about this right when you came in, is the idea was to celebrate women in all their different avatars, right? Not just as mother, wife, school teacher, nurse, but also, coolie, spy, wrestler, all of that.
There's a shooter there.
There's Revolver Dadi. And I think there's a movie being made. That's right. Thank you. Here you can have a copy. There's Revolver Dadi, who it's an incredible story. So she's now in her 80s, and we'll all see this because Bollywood's doing it. But I have to say, Girl Power discovered her before. But she started. she's a woman, a dadi in Uttar Pradesh, right? If you were to see her, she looks like every other dadi, sitting and sort of, making rotis for her grandchildren sort of thing. But this lady happened to go to a shooting range, happened to find out that she is basically an excellent markswoman, and said, I want to learn shooting. I'm 65 years old, but who cares? I'm going to do it anyway. And she did. At that point, from what I understand, the neighbors would sort of poke fun at her and say, what are you up to, and how can you start doing this at your age? And she said, well, I am. She would practice because at that point there was no equipment, etc. She had to strengthen her arm muscles, so she would hold up jugs of water for hours just to strengthen the muscles in her arm. And today, she apparently, I can't say outshoots, but she's a better markswoman than most of the police officers that she's shot with. It's incredible. She's won every national championship, and she started in her 60s. So, it's with stories like these. Many of us know the better known stories, but I think a big part of this book was to talk about some of the unknown stories.
Absolutely. There's a lady who fought the Portuguese as well.
Yes. There was, sorry, no, I need my notes, sorry. Right. Sorry. There's Rani Abaka, who single-handedly defended India against the Portuguese 6 times. But, it's a story we haven't heard. And she literally stood at the coast of she used to run a kingdom named Olal, which is close to present-day Mangalore. And the Portuguese kept trying to enter India through that route. And this woman has literally stood guard at our coastline and said, not on my watch, 6 times. And she would, shoot flames of, they called it Agnivan. It was basically these coconut torches, these torches dipped in coconut oil. And she would light them up. And she set the entire Portuguese armada ablaze, And it's a story we need to celebrate.
Tell me, Neha, how did you go about picking these 15 women? Because you also have, I was just telling these guys that one, I don't see a lot of women in history. Second is some of the women you've really covered from the heartland of India, right? Like example, I love the story of Papi Bin Rabari, right? She's just she used to do thread work and mirror work in a small village, and today her husband has joined her because she employs a lot of women in her village. How do you go about picking each of these women in?
So I think for me, look, and I was saying this to someone a little earlier in the conversation, having an encyclopedia of all of India's incredible women is well beyond the scope of this book. In fact, I think it's well beyond the scope of any book. So first off, let me just caveat my answer by saying that this is not an exhaustive list. It simply cannot be. But for me, I think when I was going about picking these women, it was the most fun part of the book, of the project, but also the most challenging part of the project. And for me, what I thought was, look, I don't want this to be a list of just 50 accomplished women, okay? You can, that list you can sort of dig up from anywhere. I wanted this to be a different list. I wanted this to be the rebels. I wanted this to be the mavericks. I wanted this to be the woman who said, that's a rule that's keeping me down. I'm going to smash that. And I think that was, if you had to think about a sort of almost like a condition, that was one of my sort of preconditions, is that this is not a list of just accomplished women. This is a book of rebels. This is a book of, but rebels with a cause, right? Rebels who said, I'm going to do something to make this country better. So that was one part of it. The second part of it, which the publishers in the room will understand, is that we also had to pick women that had a story that could be synthesized quite easily into just those 300 words, So I had to pick women that had that Kodak moment in their lives, where you could look at that and say, okay, I can synthesize, because all of these women, they've led very, very nuanced lives. They've lived lifetimes in this one life. And so how do you take all of those lifetimes and present it to a young reader in 250 or 300 words and still give enough context? So I think that was another thing that was another struggle, but I'm really glad about, I'm really happy with the way it turned out, was just synthesizing a lot of these lives into something that a young reader will say, hey, that's cool. I didn't know that. And I need to get that in 300 words every time. So that was...
Honestly, I feel that has happened many times, because otherwise we don't look beyond the obvious, right? Today we all know stories of...
The other thing that I noticed, sorry to cut you in, but the other thing that I noticed, that although there's a similarity of them smashing rules and norms and being rebels, but they're all very different from each other, you know. And the diversity in that whole list, you know, is phenomenal, you know, because you don't even repeat any warrior.
Yeah.
You know, so, or a freedom fighter. You just have one person from each, you know, milieu, if you may call it, you know. I think that's also fantastic, and it just shows the depth, you know, that you must have gone into to actually realize that they all have a similar theme, but at the same time there has to be something new in each story, you know. So not just a great woman who broke rules or, you know, did maverick things, but also, you know, texture-wise, they're all different from each other, you know. So how did you manage that?
I think one that's testimony to the diversity of our Indian women, right, is that we have had women that I don't think I or anyone else could have managed it if we didn't have these women. But the fact is that, and you know, and here my publishers are here, so I'll pitch this in. If I were to do a second book, no, but if I were to do a second, or there you go, thank you, I try. But if you were to do a second or a third, you'd find even more, because I feel like there is this incredible diversity in the country of women that have done these absolutely marvelously maverick things. And it's just a question of finding them. So how did I find the stories? Well, can I be honest? In the good old-fashioned way of just having those conversations. So obviously there was, you know, many hundreds of hours of online research, and I won't bore you with the details of that or what. I can tell you about every library in the country right now because I think I've been there. But honestly, a lot of this came with just that good old-fashioned human connection of sitting down and having a conversation like this, saying, you know what? You're a Punjabi man. Tell me about your community. You know, who were the kind of women that inspired you? And maybe you'll tell me it was your grandmother. Maybe you'll tell me it was Amrita Pritam. Maybe you'll tell me something else. And it was a lot of that. And I've had those conversations over cups of chai in the most unlikely places, believe you me. You know, in playgrounds, in railway stations, in all sorts of places. But just to say, and who inspired you?
And these people that you spoke to, did you like zero down on these focused people, or they were just you know, organically what came your way? I mean, did you go about it in a very structured kind of way? Did you say that, okay, let me speak to, you know, men over 40, women under 25, you know, I don't know, you know. I
wish I was as organized as that. I really wish I was as organized as that, but it wasn't. It was like I was saying, just the good old-fashioned organic way of saying, tell me about someone who moved you. Now, I can't tell you that every single time someone told me about someone, it made it to the book. It didn't. Many of those didn't come through because they were factually inaccurate. I'm actually very proud of the fact-checking on this book. We have checked, double-checked, and triple-checked everything that's in this book, and I hope to God, you know, we've been on the right side of things, but we're very proud of that. And I think Scholastic and I worked as a team is that to make sure that everything was correct. So going back to that, so sometimes someone would tell me a story that wouldn't pan out factually, right? And then I couldn't include that in the book. But then they would tell me stories that did work out. So for instance, I was talking to someone from the Dalit community who said, you know, similar kind of conversation, saying, you know, who's inspired you, or tell me something. And he says, have you heard about this woman called Dakshayani Velluthan? And in my ignorance, I hadn't. So I go back home and I look her up. Now, here's a woman. She was born in 1912, so over 100 years ago. At that time, in the Dalit community, you weren't allowed to cover your shoulders because you weren't allowed to cover your shoulders with cloth. You could only wear grass or beads to cover your shoulders. She tells her mom, she's a little girl at this point, she tells her mom, I'm going to go to school, covering my shoulders, and I'm going to school. Mother says, what do you mean? They'll throw sticks and stones. And she says, sure. And she did. So for 2 hours, she has to take a boat to go to school and then walk for 2 hours. She does that, covering her shoulders, goes on to school, finishes her school career. She says, I want to go on to college. She gets to college. At that time, her upper class teacher says, well, I can't teach you because, I can't teach you. And this woman stands at the doorway of her college for 3 years, becomes the first woman in the Dalit community to get a college degree, then goes on to become one of the youngest people to draft the Constitution of India. And someone like me had never heard of her. So that's an example of a phenomenal, and what's unfortunate is that many of us who call ourselves evolved and educated, have heard about phenomenal stories like the Rosa Parks of the world, right? She didn't sit down at the back of the bus. But we've had our own Rosa Parks in India. And we've just missed out. And so that's an example, Goldie, of a wonderful woman who I perhaps would not have heard about had I not had that conversation. And that came from just a good old-fashioned conversation.
Did you actually get to meet, obviously, you can't meet the older ones, obviously. But
Time machine.
Did you get to meet some families? Did you get to meet the actual women? Some of the women, there's some contemporary women in there as well.
Yeah.
Did you get to meet them?
I'm not particularly proud to say that I have met some of the women in the book, but they're all some of the stories that you've heard about. So Priyanka Chopra or a Deepa Karmakar or a PV Sindhu, those are the women I have met. They're phenomenal stories, but those are the stories you already know. It is now my endeavor as part of I feel like I am married to girl power at this point. As part of my continuing marriage to girl power is to try and meet some of the women that we've profiled, who are the untold stories.
So I just want to follow that up with one more question: is that when you meet them, do you find something that is similar in all of them?
I think I would. Don't you think?
I would think so. I think it's such a brilliant question, by the way.
Yeah. I would. This is conjecture at this point.
No,
yeah.
Because for all of them to be doing such extraordinary work when they did not have the opportunities, and to create those opportunities, I'm sure there has to be
something, no? There has to be something that is,
or
something in the eyes, or something in the way they talk, or their belief system, that makes anybody, could be a man also, just make them spring out from the normal, And I think that must be beautiful as well.
I'm absolutely sure. It's a wonderful question, and I will reserve the right to answer you when I've actually had some of these conversations. But I suspect, my hunch is that you're absolutely right. My hunch is that you're absolutely right, that there has to be something in these women that would say, you know what, not on my watch. And I'm looking forward to those conversations. Some of these are also born of circumstance. There's a wonderful story that I hope you'll read in the book. It's about a woman named Manju Devi, who is a coolie. And what happened with her was her husband passed away. Her husband used to be a coolie at Jaipur railway station. Her husband passed away. And she said, well, I've got to feed the family. I'm going to be a coolie as well. Indian Railways tells her, no, you can't, because we've never had a female coolie before. And she says, well, how does that make any sense? You asked me to go out into the fields and work with buffaloes and till the fields. That's physical labor as well. So if I can do that, why can't I be a coolie? Indian Railways then tells her, no, you can't, because we've never designed a uniform for a woman. So we don't know what to do. Now, this is what she dealt with. And she says, you know what? I got it. Don't worry about it. She designs her own fantastic red and black, the sort of the very recognizable uniform of the coolies in the Indian Railways, the red and black uniform. She designs her own fantastic salwar kameez. She, by the way, is illiterate. She cannot tell, at that point could not say which train is coming from Bombay, which train is coming from Chennai. She says, I'll figure it out. She did. She's put her children through school. The President of India was recently giving her an award. And while he was felicitating her, he actually tears up. he tears up and he says, you know what? This doesn't usually happen, but what a phenomenal story of just grit, of sheer old-fashioned grit, of saying, you can throw anything at me, I'll find a way out.
I would also add to that I think sometimes as women, you know, I would think that one thing that would stand out amongst all the stories would be grit. But I think sometimes as women, when we're thrown into deep end, circumstances teach you a lot more than any other school does. So I just feel that each one of the stories, you know, and I've read most of them, I feel was just the woman thrown at the deep end of the ocean.
Yeah.
Or she was subjected to say, you can't do this.
True. Although they are, I mean, I think our athletes, for instance, might not be an example of that. They might be an example of saying, well...
I want to do this.
I want to do this. Or a Priyanka Chopra, for instance, might be an example of saying, I want to do this. But I think you're right. I think they
or yourself, the amount of philanthropy that you do. I mean, it's amazing. You know, I was just going through and I was like, oh my God, you know, how much are you involved in? What all are you doing?
It's good fun, actually. It's good fun, and I think for me the causes sort of closest to my heart are education and women's empowerment. Sounds like a bit of a catch-all phrase, but that's what it is.
So I read somewhere that you educate the teachers so that the teachers can educate better, right?
Well, you've done your research, Goldie, in the 20 minutes that you had to prepare for this. Oh my goodness!
I was impressed with Sonali's instructions and
she chose well.
She did.
She really did.
She absolutely did.
She really did choose well. This is incredible.
That's absolutely fantastic. I used to work for the UN, and after that, I was working for an organization actually here in Parel, where very, very close to the office, a wonderful organization called Muktangan. The problem that India's education sector at that point was facing, we still face it, by the way, is that we don't have enough we don't have teachers in our government schools. We simply don't have enough teachers. So we said, all right, fine, we don't have enough teachers, but we have a lot of women from these communities, you know, from the slum communities where Muktangan was running about 10 schools at the time. We've got a lot of women in these communities who believe in these children, because you see, that's the problem. Sometimes you don't have a teacher, sometimes you have a teacher, but that teacher says, in bachon ka kuch nahi hone wala. Forget about it. So I'll just sit in my class and I'll read the newspaper because who's going to bother? But then what we found was that the women in these communities, because they were the mothers, the bhabis, the masis of these children, they believed in these kids. So we said, okay, is there an interesting way in which we can set up a pipeline of these enthusiastic, committed women and give them the right sort of pedagogical skills to work in these MCGM schools? And it worked.
Wow, that's really incredible.
It was
a lot
really
of
cool.
hard work out there.
It was, yeah, but it was very cool. Because you know what?
Phenomenal.
You had to, at the end of the day, I think, and it's going back to the theme of girl power about believing. At the end of the day, you've got to just believe.
Did you get some male teachers as well?
We did not.
Oh, that's bad.
We did not.
It sounds stereotypical, right? That only women can be great teachers.
That's true. That's
I'm
true.
just looking at it from a male perspective as well. Did any of the guys show up or no?
No, unfortunately they did not. But maybe with your nudge and push in the right direction, we might have some enthusiasm. We might have some enthusiasm from there.
Yeah. Neha, did you ever fear that people will think this is a Me Too of the Rebel Girls? Or you take that as a great compliment?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I am the first one to say that this book was inspired by the Rebel Girls. I don't shy away from it for an instant. But I think that the thing is that the Rebel Girls is a wonderful, wonderful book. But I wanted to contextualize it for our Indian children, right? And I want to contextualize it for our Indian boys and girls, saying, absolutely read those stories. They're marvelous stories of grit, determination, belief, and you know, what have you. But also realize that right here, you know, homegrown, you've got your own rebel girls. And take pride in that, you know. And like I said, you know, we know a lot of the stories that have come especially out of the US because, you know, Hollywood and popular culture does a great job of disseminating that information, but we don't know our own stories. You know, Dakshayani is a great story of a civil rights activist, but we don't know her story, but everyone in the room has heard of Rosa Parks. You know, so absolutely, it is an inspiration. Rebel Girls has been a fantastic inspiration from it. Don't shy away from it for a minute, but this has its own Indian masala that, you know, and its own Indian flavor
and I truly appreciate that, because I also feel that contextualizing that for children of today who have a very short attention span, their parents are struggling to get their kids to read. I see Lubaina and Abhita both going like nod. And contextualizing for kids to read, and you know, just putting it in those 300 words with beautiful illustrations. I'm sure that must be like a tough one. Did you decide that the brevity was key, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, what we wanted to do, and again, my editors at Scholastic were instrumental in this. They said, look, we have to get this out to as many kids as possible, right? We need to make this accessible to the boys and girls of the country without compromise. So don't, you know, keep it brief, keep it to the point, and that struck home for me. You know, we were talking about this a little earlier. Is that we all fell asleep in history class. Nobody stayed awake. Did you stay awake?
I loved history.
Oh, God, okay.
Sorry.
No, okay, two people stayed awake.
I used to
you
visualize
and Lubaina. Okay, 3. We've got 3.
I have a history exam tomorrow.
Oh, you have a history exam tomorrow. Okay. So, okay, for the rest of us. So then this, we'll write a separate book for you guys, okay? So for the rest of us...
Yeah, but I wouldn't read history. I know what you're saying. Sorry.
The rest of us fell asleep, right? Because we had to mug up all of those facts and figures, and then this happened, and then. So we took a very conscious call at the outset that, look, we're not going to get into and then. We're going to keep it really tight. We're going to almost with the filmmaker's lens, right? We're going to keep it just in that frame, in that Kodak moment. But yes, provide enough context so that the child understands the time that you're talking about, the region that you're talking about, the profession that you're talking about. So that was definitely a very sort of a deliberate call to keep it brief, so that we can hopefully reach, this book can hopefully reach as many as possible.
You know, I have, this question is very personal to me. I always feel that we always want to talk about achievers, right? I'm sure there are many who've reached there but just didn't make it. And I just feel in times like today, when people face so much pressure, kids from parents, parents from peers, just everywhere. While I know we need to celebrate stories of success, would you ever want to attempt writing stories of women who tried? Maybe they didn't achieve the scale, maybe they didn't achieve the end result. For example, we all celebrated the Chandrayaan so much, right? We all wanted to, like, it was like a personal mission for each one of us. Like it exceeded and succeeded to a certain extent, but it didn't see the culmination that we all wanted. Do you ever want to include or want inspiration for girl power too? I don't know.
That's an idea, Scholastic. What do you think?
It sounds like a good idea, and I would want to know that, while you were searching for these stories, did you find any such stories where you felt that, probably the achievements are not that high, but the stories?
Yeah,
it's all about the stories.
Yes. So were there any stories that you came across?
That where the achievements were
Maybe they don't count as much as these stories that you've included in the book, but still those stories had the meat in them, right? So when you talk about those stories, they're actually great stories.
Yeah.
Can't go up on the measure of success, but they are great stories.
No, they are. And I'm thinking of one just off the top of my head of someone I would have wanted to include in our contemporary milieu would be someone like a Miss Malini, for instance. She is, I don't know if anyone's read her biography, but she's a fantastic digital entrepreneur. If I'm not wrong, she started off as an RJ, and today has sort of one of the biggest standalone media sort of conglomerates of the country, so someone like her, where perhaps it didn't fit into the context of this particular book, but I think we're surrounded by stories like that, right? Of women who are doing extraordinary things. Absolutely.
I just feel like it reduces the pressure on the kids sometimes. I just have to be like this, or do I have... Like sometimes, like when my girls read the book, both Rebel Girls, Girl Power, they just... Or Women in Science or whatever, and they feel like they want to be that, but I don't want to add the pressure of you have to achieve that. So, there's a difference between aspiration and achievement.
I guess if you can tell, from the failure or from the attempt, what was the success that eventually happened. Like Mangal Pandey was a failure, but it started something which people are not aware of. I guess stories like that would probably still end up inspiring people in some way that, you got to try. And I keep on telling my son that, you got to compete it, you got to try it. It doesn't matter. Because I guess those are the stories that are, maybe you'll succeed later, maybe, you'll learn something which your kid might succeed from, But if you haven't tried, and I think those are the great stories that could be told as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm thinking back to, actually a man's story who's not in the book, but is a friend, and has recently started a tech venture which recently just bombed. And he and I were having this conversation, and I was telling him, I said, look, especially in something like tech, right? You've got to wear that almost as a badge of honor. Not even a battle scar. You've got to wear that as a badge of honor. Because I was reading somewhere, the guy who started PayPal, he bombed, PayPal, right? So, and I think a lot of those stories are out there for our girls and for our boys, where you've just got to keep going, and ultimately, hopefully, you'll land the rover on the moon. But you've got to just keep going.
Yeah, I just said that because
You have to say not just failure. You don't stop at failure. You have to keep going.
Absolutely.
I think that otherwise it won't be inspiring.
Also, somebody's failure might be somebody else's route to success.
Absolutely.
It could have a different kind of butterfly effect.
Not failure. It's not. It's a little bit of disappointment along the way. Like I'm reading this book on startup.
It's not disappointment.
No, I just feel because you learn so much along the process, right? The process is equally important. Like classic, right? If we were to see the Book My Show founder, right? I don't know why I'm forgetting Ashish, right? Classic example. Started like on a drunk note in South Africa, and almost was about to shut shop till again he picked up, and then again today where Book My Show is all about history. So
there you go.
I am because I'm reading a book on startups, which is I almost blew it up. And it only talks about all the times that they thought, I'm going to shut shop, but it all just began from there.
Yeah.
All the mistakes that they could have made. But so I just feel that as parents, authors, publishers, we also need to talk about stories which don't see the expected result, because it just lowers the pressure to achieve so much.
So I guess where we started from and where we're ending is slightly different in the sense. We're still concluding all the stories with a happy ending, right?
Yeah.
So there has to be a success.
Yeah.
So till the time we don't disassociate success with the story, we will not be able to achieve what we were targeting to achieve right at the beginning, right?
Success.
We have to redefine success.
You're right.
Right.
And we need to celebrate some of these failures have got so much of learning in them, right? Unless and until we start celebrating those learnings from those failures. Like once I was reading somewhere, it said, if the story does not have any failure, then probably you've not tried enough.
And
So
if
you were only trying.
And it probably doesn't make for a very good story. I mean, I would imagine even as a filmmaker, right, you've got to see some element of that you try, you fail,
On a personal level, I made a movie about 10, 12 years ago called Drona, which was the biggest failure of probably till Anurag beat me to it with Bombay Velvet. But what I noticed in that, and I somehow, I didn't want to speak about it till, it just came up in my head. But something that you mentioned is that I attempted VFX in a very major way in India, and that movie didn't work. But that gave rise to VFX pipeline. It motivated Shah Rukh to make RA1. And from then on, that was a domino effect. So it wasn't my personal success, but it was a journey that started off, and then it had a ripple effect, and somebody else got motivated. Yeah, it was for good reasons or bad reasons. I can do it better, or let me not make the mistakes that he made, or she made,
And it's just, you were very vocal about it. There are people, I think often we don't talk about failure. You always hear only the success. Like, example, everybody might feel like, oh, she's launched such a brilliant book, but they haven't, I always tell people this, that if you want to live their life, you've got to live their life. Right. You know what I mean? Like, you cannot have their end result or their success if you're not ready to do what they're doing.
Well, also, if you want to be a concert pianist, you're going to have to learn to play the piano. So you've got to sort of just
in those hours.
Right.
And I say this from a digital space, right? Like, everybody says, oh, you guys are doing so well, so much up there, so much this, that. But it's like, live the life. For example, in Malini's case, I've known her from the time that she started as an RJ, and I know the hard work that she's put in to be where she is. Or if I was to say Lubaina, right? Peekaboo, her baby, she's put in the passion year on year on year on year, right? If we only expect results, then I think we're just overburdening ourselves.
No, but coming back to your book, I think it's an incredible endeavor, and I'm really looking forward to going through each and every story and trying to make sure my son goes through it.
That would be, and I think, like you said, if we can raise feminist boys, then I think that's our job done. And thank you for being a feminist man.
I'm just being a man.
Yes, very
and
well.
You're putting the labels on it,
First, we have the biggest question that people used to fear answering is, what does feminism mean to you? Now we've added feminist man. Now he's going to really have to think through.
No, I just think a person should be a person,
There you are.
And,
the rest follows.
Yeah, I don't know what is the counter of a feminist. So
that's wonderful then.
So
that's.
If you're a group around ladies and you say that you're a feminist, that's not taken very well.
Why?
Yeah, because they're like, why does he have to say that he's a feminist?
Yeah.
You should you should just be.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying we're still finding a place. Should I hold the door open or no? Should I offer my seat or no?
It's a struggle, is it?
Yeah,
It's hard.
you're trying to be polite, but you don't want to upset,
Why not doing a photo op? The photographer, nice lady, she said that have these two ladies around you and do like this. That's what you The book's called Good Powers.
Well, I'm in a way it's heartening to hear that the men are finally feeling a bit uncomfortable. They are. They're confused.
Yeah, I think confused. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm just
confused.
I don't want to offend,
But right, no.
But Neha, thank you so much for writing a book which talks about stories from the heartland, because I truly believe that each one of us sitting in this room is not rest of India, and I truly believe that those stories which come out from the heartlands and which have, like you said, about the Dadi learning at the revolver at 65, I think that we need to share those stories now more than ever before with our girls and with our boys. And I'm so glad that there's finally a book who talks about all of those stories. So amazing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for being here. Of course, Mansi, but also Goldie. Tell Sonali we missed her. But she couldn't have had a better stand-in even if she tried. You were absolutely magnificent. So thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who came. It's like I said, this book has been a labor of love straight from the heart. And I am so grateful to be able to share it with you. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we need a photograph.